The phone rang at exactly 7:30 in the morning, breaking the peaceful silence of the Johnson family home in Lagos. Grace Johnson, wrapped in her expensive silk robe, picked up the phone with a smile, expecting to hear her daughter's voice talking about wedding plans. Instead, she heard something that made her blood run cold. "Mrs. Johnson, this is Dr. Williams from Lagos University Teaching Hospital. I'm calling about your daughter, Faith. She's been in a terrible accident." Grace's hand trembled as she gripped the phone tighter. What kind of accident?" "A car crash on the 3rd Mainland Bridge. She's alive, but—" The doctor paused. "Mrs. Johnson, there's something else. We found papers in her car. It looks like she was on her way to register her marriage certificate. She got married yesterday, didn't she?" The phone slipped from Grace's hand and crashed to the floor. Just 24 hours earlier, Grace had done something she never thought she would do. She had slammed the door in her own daughter's face and told her never to come back. All because Faith wanted to marry David, a simple mechanic who lived in the poor area of Mushin. But now, as Grace stood frozen in her living room, she had no idea that her daughter's simple husband was about to change everything. What Grace didn't know was that Faith had built something incredible in secret, something that would make their family name famous across all of Nigeria. The sound of her husband Peter rushing down the stairs brought Grace back to reality. "Grace, what happened? Why are you crying?" Peter asked, his big belly shaking as he hurried toward her. Grace could barely speak. "Faith, she's in the hospital." "And Peter?" She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "She really married that boy, that poor mechanic." Peter's face turned red with anger, just like it had yesterday during the big fight. "I don't care if she's hurt. She chose him over her family. She made her bed. Now she can lie in it." But Grace felt something different stirring in her heart. Yesterday, when Faith had come home in her simple white dress, holding hands with David and begging for their blessing, Grace had been so angry. How could her daughter, who went to the best schools and had everything money could buy, want to marry a man who fixed cars for a living? "Mama, Papa," Faith had said, her voice shaking with hope and fear. "I know David doesn't have much money, but he loves me, and I love him. We got married today at the registry. Please just meet him properly. Give him a chance." Grace remembered how David had stood there quietly, wearing his only good shirt and shoes that were clearly old but very clean. He hadn't said much, but his eyes were kind and respectful. "You have brought shame to this family," Peter had shouted. "We sent you to university so you could marry a doctor or a lawyer, not some dirty mechanic." "David isn't dirty, Papa. He's hardworking and honest and—" "Get out," Peter had yelled. "If you choose him, then you are no longer our daughter." Grace had watched her only child walk away, her white dress disappearing into the darkness of the evening. Faith had turned back once, hope still shining in her eyes, but Grace had been too proud and angry to call her back. Now, standing in her fancy living room with her husband still ranting about family honor, Grace felt something break inside her chest. What if Faith died in that hospital bed, thinking her parents hated her? The phone rang again. This time Peter picked it up. "Hello? Yes, this is Peter Johnson." He listened for a moment, and Grace watched his angry expression slowly change to confusion, then shock. "What did you say? Can you repeat that?" Grace moved closer, trying to hear what was being said. Yes, we'll be right there," Peter said, his voice now very quiet and strange. He hung up the phone and stared at Grace with wide eyes. "Who was that?" Grace asked. "That was someone from the hospital." "But Grace—" Peter sat down heavily in his chair. "They weren't calling about Faith's injuries. They were calling about something else entirely. Something about David." Grace felt her heart skip. "What about David?" Peter looked at her with an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that looked almost like fear. "Grace, that mechanic our daughter married." He paused, as if he couldn't believe the words he was about to say. "He's not just any mechanic." The morning sun streamed through their window, but Grace felt a chill run down her spine. Something in Peter's voice told her that everything they thought they knew about their daughter's husband was wrong. Very, very wrong. "What do you mean?" she whispered. But before Peter could answer, the phone rang again, and this time, the voice on the other end would tell them something that would change their understanding of their daughter's choice forever. Something that would make them realize they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. The third phone call came from someone Grace never expected to hear from Chief Williams, the richest man in Lagos and Peter's former boss. "Peter, my boy," Chief Williams' voice boomed through the phone. "I just heard the most amazing news. Your daughter married David Okafor." Peter held the phone away from his ear, confused. "Chief, yes, but I don't understand why you're excited. He's just a mechanic from Mushin." Chief Williams laughed so hard that Grace could hear it from across the room. "A mechanic? Peter, do you know who David Okafor really is?" Grace grabbed Peter's arm, her heart beating fast. "Chief, please tell me. We're very confused right now." "My dear boy, David Okafor is the secret owner of Okafor Industries. He owns the biggest car manufacturing company in West Africa. The boy is worth over 50 billion naira." Peter's mouth fell open. Grace felt like the room was spinning. But that can't be right," Peter stammered. "He lives in Mushin. He fixes cars in a small shop." "That's his cover, Peter. The boy is brilliant. He started from nothing and built an empire, but he wanted to stay humble and find a wife who would love him for who he is, not his money. And it seems he found that in your faith." Grace sat down hard on the sofa, her legs suddenly weak. "Chief, are you absolutely sure?" "Sure? My dear, I've been trying to get a meeting with David Okafor for 3 years. My own company has been begging to partner with Okafor Industries. And now he's your son-in-law." After Chief Williams hung up, Grace and Peter sat in complete silence. The weight of what they had done was crushing them. "We threw away our daughter," Grace whispered, tears streaming down her face. "And we insulted one of the richest men in Nigeria." But their shock was nothing compared to what they discovered when they arrived at the hospital. Lagos University Teaching Hospital was in chaos. News reporters filled the parking lot, and security guards were everywhere. Grace couldn't understand why until they tried to enter the building. "Excuse me, you can't go in without permission," a security guard said. "We're protecting the privacy of Mr. and Mrs. Okafor." "Mrs. Okafor is our daughter," Peter said desperately. The guard looked at them suspiciously and made a phone call. A few minutes later, a tall, handsome man in an expensive suit came out. Grace recognized him immediately. It was David, but he looked completely different. Gone were the simple clothes and humble appearance. This David looked like what he really was, a powerful businessman. "Mr. and Mrs. Johnson," David said quietly. His voice was polite but cold. "Faith is stable, but she's still unconscious. The doctors say she might wake up today." Grace started to cry. "David, we're so sorry. We didn't know." "You didn't know I was rich," David interrupted. "But would that have mattered if I was really just a poor mechanic who loved your daughter?" Peter looked down at his shoes, ashamed. "Faith told you I was hardworking and honest," David continued. "She told you I loved her. She begged you to give me a chance. But you couldn't see past my old clothes and my job. Please forgive us," Grace begged. "We made a terrible mistake." David's expression softened just a little. "The mistake wasn't rejecting me, Mrs. Johnson. The mistake was rejecting your daughter's happiness. Faith cried all night because the people she loved most couldn't accept the man she chose to spend her life with." As they walked toward Faith's room, David began to tell them things about their daughter that shocked them even more. "Did you know that Faith has been secretly helping me with my business for the past 2 years?" David asked. "She's the one who designed our new car models. She's the one who came up with the marketing strategy that made us the biggest car company in West Africa." Grace stopped walking. "What? Your daughter isn't just my wife, Mrs. Johnson. She's my business partner. Together, we've created something incredible. We've been planning to reveal everything after our wedding. and we wanted to use our success to help poor families across Nigeria. Peter was speechless. All this time, he thought his daughter was wasting her education on a poor man, but she had actually been building an empire. "There's something else," David said as they reached Faith's room. "Yesterday, before the accident, Faith was on her way to the bank to sign papers for our biggest project yet." "What project?" Grace asked. David smiled for the first time since they had arrived. "We're building a free school and hospital in Mushin, where I grew up. We're calling it the Faith Johnson Okafor Foundation. Faith insisted on keeping your family name as part of it, even after you rejected her." Grace's legs gave out, and she had to lean against the wall. Her daughter, the child she had raised and then rejected, was planning to honor their family name even after they had dishonored her. "She still loves you," David said softly. "Even after everything that happened yesterday, she still loves you. That's the kind of person your daughter is." As they entered Faith's room, Grace saw her daughter lying in the hospital bed, looking pale but peaceful. Machines beeped softly around her, and her left arm was in a cast. But what made Grace gasp wasn't Faith's injuries. It was what she saw on the bedside table. There were newspapers, lots of them, and every single one had Faith's picture on the front page. "Mystery billionaire's wife injured in crash. The woman behind Okafor Industries' success, Faith Johnson Okafor, the hidden genius of Nigerian business." David saw Grace staring at the newspapers. "The story broke this morning. Everyone wants to know about the brilliant woman who helped build the biggest car company in West Africa. Faith is famous now, Mrs. Johnson. She's being called the most successful young businesswoman in Nigeria." Grace picked up one of the newspapers with shaking hands. The article talked about Faith's education, her intelligence, her business ideas, and her plans to help poor children get education and healthcare. At the bottom of the article was a quote that made Grace's heart break. "Friends say that despite her success, Faith Johnson Okafor's biggest dream was simply to have her parents' blessing on her marriage." As Grace read those words, Faith's eyes slowly began to open. "Manga," Faith whispered weakly. Grace rushed to her daughter's bedside, tears flowing freely. "Faith, my baby, I'm here." Faith looked around the room confused, then her eyes landed on the newspapers. "David, why are there reporters outside? What happened?" David took her hand gently. "The secret is out, my love. Everyone knows about us now." Faith tried to sit up, wincing from pain. "But we weren't ready to reveal everything yet. We still have so much work to do." "I know," David said, "but maybe this is God's way of telling us it's time." Faith looked at her parents, and Grace could see the hurt still fresh in her daughter's eyes. "Mama, Papa, why are you here?" It was the question Grace had been dreading. How could she explain that they had only come because they discovered David was rich? How could she tell her daughter that they might never have come if he had really been just a poor mechanic? But before Grace could answer, a nurse rushed into the room with an expression of panic on her face. "Mr. Okafor, sir, you need to come quickly. There's been an emergency at your factory. There's been an explosion, and—" The nurse paused, looking scared. "Sir, they're saying it might not have been an accident." David's face went white. Faith struggled to sit up in her hospital bed, ignoring the pain in her arm. "What do you mean it wasn't an accident?" Faith asked, her voice stronger now despite her injuries. The nurse looked nervously between David and Faith. "Sir, the fire department found evidence that someone planted explosives in the main factory building. 3 of your workers are injured, but thankfully no one died." Grace watched as her daughter's face transformed from confusion to determination. Even injured and weak, Faith was already thinking like a business leader. "David, we need to get to the factory right now," Faith said, trying to get out of bed. "No," David said firmly but gently. "You just woke up from a serious accident. I'll handle this. We handle everything together, remember?" Faith looked at him with fierce eyes. "That's what partners do." Grace felt a surge of pride watching her daughter. This was the Faith she had raised strong, determined, and caring about others even when she was hurt. But before anyone could move, Grace's phone buzzed with a text message. When she read it, her face went pale. "Grace, what is it?" Peter asked. Grace showed him the message. It was from her brother, Uncle Tony, who lived in America. "Saw the news about Faith. Tell her I'm proud of her. Also, be careful. Marcus Adebayo is back in Lagos. He's been asking questions about Faith's husband." David's entire body tensed when he heard the name. "Marcus Adebayo? You know him?" Peter asked. "He's my biggest competitor," David said grimly. "He owns Adebayo Motors, and he's been trying to destroy my business for years. When I started becoming successful, he tried to buy me out. When I refused, he began spreading lies about my cars being unsafe." Faith grabbed David's hand. "David, you think he's behind the explosion?" Before David could answer, Dr. Williams, the doctor who had called Grace that morning, entered the room with a serious expression. "Mrs. Okafor, I have some news. We've been running tests on your blood from the accident, and we found something unusual." Everyone in the room focused on the doctor. "What kind of unusual?" Faith asked. "There were traces of a sleeping medication in your blood. A very strong one. Mrs. Okafor, had you taken any sleeping pills before driving yesterday?" Faith shook her head. "No, I never take sleeping pills. I was wide awake when I left the house." Grace felt a chill run through her body. "Doctor, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that someone may have drugged Mrs. Okafor before she got into that car. The accident might not have been an accident at all." The room fell silent. Grace looked at her daughter lying in the hospital bed and realized that Faith hadn't just been rejected by her family. Someone had actually tried to kill her. "David," Faith said quietly, "Marcus didn't just attack the factory. He tried to kill me too." David stood up, his face hard with anger. "I'm calling the police right now." But Faith caught his arm. "Wait, David, if we call the police now, Marcus will just deny everything. We need proof." "Faith, someone tried to kill you. I don't care about proof." "I do," Faith said firmly. "Because if we don't stop him properly, he'll just try again. And next time, we might not be so lucky." Grace watched her daughter with amazement. Even after being poisoned and nearly killed, Faith was still thinking clearly and planning ahead. This was the daughter Grace had raised, but also the successful businesswoman Grace had never had the chance to know. "What do you want to do?" David asked. Faith smiled, and Grace saw a spark of something dangerous in her daughter's eyes. "I want to give Marcus exactly what he's been asking for. A meeting with the mysterious Mrs. Okafor." Over the next hour, Faith explained her plan. Despite being in a hospital bed with a broken arm, she was going to set up a trap for Marcus Adebayo. She would pretend to be scared and weak, and offer to sell him her share of Okafor Industries for a very low price. When Marcus came to meet her, they would record him confessing to both the factory explosion and her attempted murder. "Faith, this is too dangerous," Grace said. It was the first time she had spoken up since learning about the poisoning. "What if something goes wrong?" Faith looked at her mother with surprise. "Mama, you're worried about me?" Grace felt tears starting again. "Of course I'm worried about you. You're my daughter. I've always been worried about you. But yesterday you told me I was no longer your daughter." The words hit Grace like a slap. Peter looked down at his hands, ashamed. "Faith," Grace said, sitting down beside the hospital bed. "Yesterday I was angry and scared. I was scared that you were making a mistake. I was scared that you would be poor and unhappy. I was scared that people would laugh at our family. And now," Faith asked quietly, "now I'm scared that I've lost the most important thing in the world, my daughter's love and respect." Faith was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took Grace's hand with her good arm. "Mama, I never stopped loving you. Even when you slammed the door in my face, I never stopped loving you. But I also never stopped being hurt." Grace squeezed her daughter's hand. "Faith, I want you to know something. Even if David really had been a poor mechanic, I should have trusted your judgment. I should have seen that he was a good man who loved you. I should have supported your happiness." "Do you really mean that, Mama?" "I mean it with all my heart. And I'm sorry it took almost losing you to realize it. Peter moved closer to the bed. Faith, I'm sorry too. I was so worried about what other people would think that I forgot what really mattered, your happiness. Faith smiled through her tears. I forgive you both, but I need you to understand something. David and I built something beautiful together. We built it with love, hard work, and dreams of helping other people. That legacy isn't going anywhere, no matter what Marcus Adebayo tries to do. What do you mean? Grace asked. Faith looked at David, and he nodded encouragingly. Mama, Papa, tomorrow we're announcing the Faith Johnson Okafor Foundation officially. We're building schools and hospitals across Nigeria. We're creating jobs for thousands of people. We're changing lives. Grace felt her heart swell with pride. Using our family name? Using our family name, Faith confirmed. Because even when you rejected me, I never rejected being your daughter. The trap for Marcus Adebayo worked perfectly. Within 2 days, he was arrested for attempted murder, sabotage, and several other crimes. The recordings Faith and David made of his confession were played on every news channel in Nigeria. But the bigger story was the official launch of the Faith Johnson Okafor Foundation. Grace and Peter stood proudly beside their daughter and son-in-law as they announced their plans to build 50 schools and 10 hospitals across Nigeria, with the first one starting in Mushin, where David grew up. This foundation represents something very important to us, Faith said to the crowd of reporters and dignitaries. It represents the power of love, forgiveness, and second chances. It represents the belief that where you come from doesn't matter as much as where you're going. And it represents the hope that every child in Nigeria will have the chance to build their own legacy. Grace wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her daughter speak. This was the legacy Faith had built, and not just wealth and success, but hope for thousands of families across Nigeria. After the ceremony, as they sat together as a family for the first time in months, Faith made an announcement that surprised everyone. David and I have decided something, she said, looking at her parents. We want you both to join the foundation. Mama, we want you to help run the schools. Papa, we want you to help with the business side. Grace's mouth fell open. But Faith, we don't deserve.
Mama, Faith interrupted gently.
The foundation is about second chances. Everyone deserves a second chance. Even parents who make mistakes. 6 months later, Grace stood in the courtyard of the first Faith Johnson Okafor Foundation School in Mushin. Children in clean uniforms played and laughed while their parents watched with joy and gratitude. Mrs. Johnson, a little girl, ran up to Grace with a big smile. Look what I drew. The drawing showed a family, a mother, father, and daughter holding hands under a rainbow. It's beautiful, Kemi, Grace said, kneeling down to the girl's level. Tell me about it. It's my family, Kemi said proudly. My mama says that families can have fights, but love always brings them back together, just like Mrs. Faith and her parents. Grace smiled and hugged the little girl. She looked across the courtyard and saw Faith and David working together, planning the next school. She saw Peter helping children with their homework, using skills from his business career to teach them about math and money. The family that had once been broken by pride and misunderstanding was now united in purpose, helping other families stay together and build their own legacies. Faith had been right all along. Love, forgiveness, and second chances were the most powerful forces in the world. And sometimes the most beautiful legacies were built not in spite of our mistakes, but because of how we chose to learn from them. The little girl's drawing was exactly right. Love really did bring families back together. And in Faith's case, it had brought them back together in a way that would help thousands of other families for generations to come. That was Faith Johnson Okafor's true legacy, not just the schools and hospitals that bore her name, but the proof that love, when given a second chance, could change the world.